The Denver Broncos made their first big move of NFL free agency, signing Brandon Jones to a 3-year deal. Is he the starter next to PJ Locke? We break that all down here on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day. Do us a favor, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe or that follow button on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast for free so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite teams. NFL free agency is officially here. The Broncos already making some moves on their roster. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Sayre, Denver getting busy, not necessarily to an extent where they're like making a ton of moves, but Denver making a move in which they felt like was going to be a big addition to their roster during the NFL free agency period. They have signed former Miami Dolphins safety Brandon Jones to a 3-year contract worth $20 million, $12.5 million guaranteed, up to potentially $22.5 million value for him over the course of the next 3 seasons, a former safety out of Texas. So now the Broncos safety position right now really headlined by Texas Longhorns.
It is. It's kind of cool, right? These guys were all together 2018 for the Texas Longhorns. That was their last season all together as PJ Locke went to the NFL in 2019. But back in that 2018 season for Texas, the combination of Brandon Jones, Caden Sterns, and PJ Locke, they combined, Cody, for 209 total tackles, 6 interceptions. And what's interesting about this move for the Broncos, Cody, is that we've talked about PJ Locke's versatility in the past. We've talked about Caden Sterns, how he can kind of float back and forth in the formation. And I guess the same is really true of Brandon Jones as well. He's somebody who blitzed a very nice 69 times for the Miami Dolphins back in 2021, got 5 sacks that year for the Dolphins, but really improved on the back end in coverage here in 2023. So a young safety room for the Denver Broncos after years since 2019, essentially, of having Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons back there. The Broncos now, everybody in that group is 27 or younger, and they're all former teammates, which is pretty cool.
No, and that's a huge thing to be able to have, is like they're all familiar with one another. And I think it's cool as well, because one thing we see in the locker room, this is something that never usually like becomes publicized, but every time, like college football rivalry week, right? Like you look at Texas, Oklahoma, man, it gets so heated in the locker room with the debates. And, you know, PJ Locke last year was joking around that the Broncos, they keep adding all these Oklahoma guys. And he's like, I wonder if there's a conspiracy here. Well, now they're adding more Texas guys to the roster. So I know this year I'm going to be looking forward to seeing those debates that happen inside the locker room here. But obviously, I think we look at this move here. I think that a majority of Broncos fans are looking at like the financial value of it, looking at what the safety market is in terms of where things have been, and obviously all the big name veterans that are available in free agency. You're getting a young player here that's joining the back end of Vance Joseph's defense. In my opinion, on paper, Sayre, I like this move. I think it's a good addition for them. And I know here in a little bit, we're going to dive into all the ways that this signing gives the Broncos positional flexibility. When we talk about the back end of the secondary, it gives them options in different personnel packages. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I like this move here. And this to me indicates that he is signing on as a starter here for the Broncos, which, look, we know PJ re-signed on the 2-year deal. We talked about that in yesterday's episode of Locked on Broncos. But one of the things we also have to highlight here is I think it keeps PJ in that box safety role that we saw him have success in when Justin was the starter. I think we see Brandon Jones move to that middle post safety role that we saw Justin playing in there. But now I also feel like it could change as well, because you mentioned his experience as a box safety in terms of being able to get the sacks that he did in 2021. I wonder how Vance Joseph views this from a personnel standpoint. Is that the envisioned role for him, is to be that middle of the field guy that Justin played and allow PJ to do what he did? Or could they just both be interchangeable where PJ could play the middle of the field as well and Jones can drop as well? Like that to me is where I have questions about maybe this signing.
You kind of hope that these guys can all play that versatile role, right? Because of the way that we've seen both Caden Sterns and PJ Locke struggle a bit with injuries in their time in Denver. you really hope that the top three guys at the position are going to be able to be interchangeable, right? If one needs to go play in the back end and one needs to come into the box, like they're going to be able to do all of those different things for you. And I think there is, like you mentioned with the contract does indicate like Brandon Jones, he's going to be a starter for you. He hasn't been a full-time starter for the Miami Dolphins, though, over the course of his career. I mean, he is a former third-round draft choice, but last season and over the last 2 years combined, he's played just over a total of 800 snaps in those 2 seasons. So it's not like he's out there playing every single down, which the Broncos are used to. I mean, they've been getting 1,000 snaps a season from Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson. They get those guys every single down. They barely ever come off the field. That's going to be an interesting wrinkle in all of this. Like they'll probably play versatile roles, absolutely. But I think one of the main motivators for the Broncos going after Brandon Jones is the fact that he was so good in coverage down the stretch last season. Pro Football Focus put out a tweet, Cody, that the quarterback rating into his coverage from week 12 on to the end of the season, which is about a third of the season, it was under 40. So when you're talking about efficiency and coverage, he didn't allow any really missteps on the back end. So maybe this is the guy that they trust the most to say, hey, play that deep center field position. And I think another interesting thing with this too, Cody, is that Jim Leonhard, he's been brought in as the new defensive backs coach and pass game coordinator on the defensive side. I can't help but think the Broncos went to Jim Leonhard and had him help scout, hey, who's going to be the best fit for what we want to do in terms of that pass game plan. Hey, you got all these former Longhorns. I keep checking to see how many of these guys did Jim help recruit when he was at Wisconsin. But no, I think this is a fascinating wrinkle to add. When you bring in a new position coach, you immediately go sign a player to join him in that room. I think that's kind of an interesting little tidbit here as we look at this Brandon Jones move.
And we also talk about it from the lens that we didn't expect Denver to go out there and make any big splash signings. I don't think this is a big splash signing, but I also think this is one where if you throw the rock in the pond, it has some pretty good ripple effects here for Denver, at least on paper. And now the process begins for Denver going through the rest of free agency here. Are they done adding to the safety position? Could they add it in the NFL draft? These are some things to ponder. But I think the biggest question that we have here that we're going to address on today's episode of Locked On Broncos, how does the Jones signing give the Broncos back into the secondary positional flexibility in certain personnel packages? We'll give you an idea of what every package looks like, different scenarios for different players at safety here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. As you all know, it America's #1 sportsbook. And folks, guess what? It is March. Not only is it my birthday, but there's a big college basketball extravaganza that will be ongoing. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So if you sign up as a brand new customer at FanDuel Sportsbook here today, you place a $5 bet on anything. That bet wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. That's right, $200 to use on point spreads, on money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. You come the big tournament here in the next couple of weeks. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon.
The Denver Broncos have a trio of former Texas Longhorns that could start for them at the safety position. How are they going to get the most out of these guys? Are we going to see them on the field at the same time quite a bit? Going to be fascinating as we talk about the first big free agent signing outside of Denver for the Broncos here in 2024. Brandon Jones coming aboard, a very new look secondary for the Denver Broncos. We're going to break down his fit, what it means for the other guys already on the roster on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And we can't thank you enough for rocking with us every single day, especially in the offseason where, hey, there's going to be curveballs thrown every day. So keep it tuned in to Locked On Broncos every single day. Watch out for bonus episodes right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Cody's throwing a curveball. If you can't see it, it's because you're not subscribed on YouTube yet. You need to go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Watch the show there. Get us in your algorithm. Cody, that's one of my favorite things is like I flip open YouTube. Locked On Broncos is right there on the algorithm. And you know what? we got to watch ourselves, right? We got to evaluate, but we need the people to jump on board. So thank you for joining this offseason. Let's talk about more of this fit for Brandon Jones, because now we've talked on this show, like we kind of assumed PJ Locke and Caden Sterns, that's going to be the starting duo for Denver. Now you add one of their former college teammates, Brandon Jones, to the mix. What kind of personnel packages do you kind of envision after this move, Cody, for the Broncos secondary?
I feel like there are three different options, I think, that give Denver flexibility. Now, granted, when we talk about dime, for those that don't know what the dime package is, dime means that there are 6 defensive backs on the field. Nickel means that there's 5 defensive backs on the field. We're going to talk primarily dime here because that became a really big portion of Denver's base really toward the end of last season, depending on the spread amount teams that they faced. You saw them in dime a lot. You saw pretty much a base nickel for them versus the base standard 3-4 defense. So for me, Jones, with his experience playing that middle post and also being able to play the box safety role here, gives Denver flexibility with where they can line guys up, right? So with dime personnel in mind, option number one, okay, let's say you have Brandon Jones and Caden Sterns as the 2 high shell, right? The 2 guys here that more so are going to be on there in passing situations. Okay, if you're going to play quarter, half, you're going to have 2 guys that can play the back end, can protect from some of those deep balls that we like to see quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes try to throw down there. But you also get PJ Locke inside the slot, opposite of Jaquan McMillan, right inside the dime, where, look, we saw last year, Vance Joseph got very creative. There were times where PJ was lined up in the dime package inside the slot opposite of Jaquan, and they would blitz him. Sometimes they would blitz both of them from the slot at the same exact time. And then now you have guys on the back end that can cover. Look, Patrick Surtain, got a lot of confidence in him. Right now, we don't even know who the other cornerback's going to be. But I kind of like this from a ball hawking standpoint, with Jones being able to be an improved coverage guy, as you mentioned, with obviously the metrics and the success that he had. 3 career interceptions for him in 4 seasons. 2 of those came last year out of a very similar style of defense under Vic Fangio. Now we know how players in Miami felt about Vic Fangio, which is why he left after 1 year, and everyone was kind of putting, a little bit of gasoline on the fire when he was gone. Now Jones gives you another opportunity. Caden Sterns, when healthy, we know can be a ball hawk machine and has proven to be a very valuable asset to what Denver wants to do. In my opinion, that is option number 1 that Denver has. Now, if you look at it from option number 2, Sayre, what might you see here from the Broncos' perspective personnel-wise?
Well, you could see obviously Brandon Jones and PJ Locke in that 2 high shell with Sterns kind of in the slot, which is, I feel like that's where we've seen Sterns kind of have his most success, right? The things that got us excited about him when I think he picked off Matt Ryan twice from that alignment against the Colts a couple seasons ago. And then we saw him have success going after Lamar Jackson as a blitzer when the Broncos played the Ravens a couple years ago. And I know that we have a very limited sample to go off of with Caden Sterns, but it just feels like with his reactionary quickness, just ask Dak Prescott about Caden Sterns' reactionary quickness from this alignment. This may be where he's best. And I know that he has maybe the best athletic profile of any of the 3 of these guys. He's the RAS, the RAS hole, so to speak, for the Denver Broncos at safety, basically a 10 out of 10 on the scale. But with Caden Sterns, is that athleticism best utilized matching up against other players in the slot and reading and reacting to the quarterback as quickly as possible, as opposed to playing the back end and just being effective when it comes to those deep passes downfield? I feel like his instincts, his ability to break on the ball, his ability to make plays as a blitzer, as a pass rusher, this is kind of where you feel like the Broncos, I can't say embarrassment of riches, Cody. I think that would be a little too hyperbolic at this point, but with these guys, like if you could get them all 3 to stay healthy, this option here with Jones and Locke on the back end, and then Sterns in that dime or that slot position, that could be the ideal scenario for the Broncos going forward.
And I'll give you a third option here that Denver could do. They could roll with Sterns and Locke as the 2 high shell, which, if you look, there is some sample size. There is some tape. Granted, it is in the NFL preseason. If you want to go back to 2019, 2020, 2021, you see these guys working a lot in that 2 high shell look in the preseason there under Vic Fangio. And then you could have Jones in the slot opposite of Jaquan McMillan. I mean, I like that option as well, but this is a young player. And I feel like for Denver, you get a player that has the opportunity to, come up and play the run, can play the pass. Like, I think that there's a certain mold here. And I'm very curious. Like, we go back to now Jim Leonard being the passing game coordinator. What is his vision for the room, right? Under Christian Parker, it was entirely different. Christian Parker, in my opinion, was a coach who obviously very well respected and is a coach that empowers his players, right? Wants to hear from them as to understand, okay, hey, if this works for you, let's embrace it. If this isn't working for you, how can we try to find a way to adapt it? I'm very curious, is Jim Leonhard cut from the same cloth, or is Jim Leonhard more like a Sean Payton, my way or the highway type of guy? That is something I'm very curious to finding out about, the dynamic of not only just the safety room, but the defensive back room in general here for the Broncos. I mean, when you look at it, there are options aplenty. And I mean, we even talk about depth. I know we're going to dive deeper into that here in a moment on the show, but part of me also wonders, could we maybe see positional changes? Could Riley Moss, if he's not in line for cornerback, could he maybe play some safety for Denver? I mean, I'm starting to wonder if we're going to start seeing a transition with it, especially the safety market, the financials with that. You're going to have a lot of safety guys wishing they're going to play corner, because corner, obviously, you get a better market in terms of financials there. But could we start seeing positionless guys that are just defensive backs that could play anywhere and everywhere? To me, under Jim Leonhard, I get the idea this might be more of a reality than we think.
It could very well be, Cody, because historically speaking, the guys that go from corner to safety seem to be kind of limited in one way or another. Like when we do see players transition from that position, it's like, well, he doesn't necessarily have the best size to play outside corner, or he doesn't necessarily have the best long speed to play outside corner. So you match him up, or the hips aren't quite there to match up as a man-to-man corner. So there's different reasons why, but I feel like historically speaking, that's traditionally why you see guys transition from corner to safety. But you could be right. Maybe you start identifying players who, in terms of their size and their overall athletic profile, they can interchange. They can go between spots. I mean, Iowa is kind of an example of that, aren't they? I mean, we saw Cooper DeJean, Riley Moss's teammate. He played safety initially at Iowa, moved to the cornerback position, and he's just cut from that cloth athletically to be able to do that. And I think there are other players that can do that. And like you said, NFL players and future NFL players, they're always going to be following the money. If the money is at corner, that's where they're going to go.
That's going to be a very interesting dynamic. Look, Broncos country, we want to hear your thoughts as you're listening or watching today's episode, Locked On Broncos. What do you think about the personnel options that the Broncos have, particularly at the safety position, where it will be headlined by Brandon Jones, PJ Locke, and Caden Sterns as the top three guys, three Longhorns, so to speak? Maybe Matthew McConaughey will become a Broncos fan, which would have us saying, all right, all right, all right. But on top of that, there are some ripple effects that we have to take a look at here from a personnel standpoint. How does this move here impact the Broncos' younger safeties that they have on the roster and the future of their development? We dive deep into all that here on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. And the question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and to make it a priority. And therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. In the past, I've utilized BetterHelp therapy, especially as I made the transition, moving to a new place, a new city where I knew nobody. There was a lot of stress starting a new job, being in a new environment. And BetterHelp was one place that allowed me to connect with a licensed therapist. She helped me establish tools that helped me deal with things like stress and anxiety, and helps me in other areas of my life, things that I still use to this day here. I believe in therapy, and I think it's been beneficial to me. My experience with BetterHelp was amazing, and I've had listeners of Locked On Broncos also tell me that BetterHelp has benefited them because of how convenient it is to get therapy and to get access to the tools that you need to understand things a little bit more directly from the comfort of your home. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and best of all, suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time at no additional charge if you and your therapist don't vibe well. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. How will the addition of Brandon Jones impact the potential development of guys like Delarian Turner-Yale or even J.L. Skinner as he prepares for his second season in the National Football League? We'll break it all down here on today's brand new episode of Locked On Broncos. We just wanted to say thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos country who make us your first listen of the day every single day. Thank you so much for making the show exactly what it is. Hit that subscribe or follow button so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team. we talk about ripple effects, and I hope that's a term that Broncos country starts to look at, right? Because every decision that the team makes, whether it's a good move, whether it's a bad move, it has a ripple effect, right? Throwing a rock or throwing something into a pond, you're going to see the different waves here. Some could be very big, some could be very small. Part of me feels like here, and you and I talked about this, after the Broncos released Justin Simmons last week, we already knew that they were eyeing the future. But what did that look like, right? We envisioned, okay, if they bring PJ Locke, he's in the mix. They did just that. Caden Sterns is still on the roster. He's in the mix. Are they going to add a veteran safety? Well, they just did that, right? So what does that mean for the younger guys on the back end, like Delarian Turner-Yell, and also looking at a J.L. Skinner as he prepares for year number 2 in the NFL, used all of his rookie season really as a red shirt, got some action in the season finale here for the Broncos, has some size, can be a thumper to him. But I can't help but look at this move here and say that maybe it's the Broncos feel like he's not necessarily ready just yet to have a defensive role on the field, but it doesn't mean that a guy like J.L. Skinner can't get on the field in 2024 when you have all these opportunities now to make it on special teams.
He's got to get on the field on special teams, doesn't he? You and I talked about this after PJ Locke re-signed, and you said this, Cody, that with him inserting into the starting lineup at the safety position, it has a ripple effect, as you said, on special teams. With Caden Sterns potentially playing more defensively as well, that also takes two primary guys off your special teams units. You need Sterns and Locke if they're going to play defensively more. You're going to need to replace them on special teams. And I think that with a number of other guys on this Broncos roster leaving in free agency, J.L. Skinner is in line, and he has the perfect makeup to be a special teams ace in the NFL. I think even with his injury going into last year, I think a lot of people felt Cody coming out of that NFL draft as a 6th-round pick, he's 6'4", he's athletic, he's a heat-seeking missile out there on the field. That's the type of guy that you want to play special teams and excel on special teams. And I think he can. Like Riley Moss, he's going to be potentially taking a bigger role defensively. He was one of the Broncos' best special teams guys last year. So J.L. Skinner, it's like the opportunity couldn't be more there for him. He needs to seize that opportunity. And don't focus on defense right now. We didn't even see him play hardly at all this past year, even in the preseason. We need J.L. Skinner to step up for this Broncos roster as a special teams ace and potentially become one of their best overall special teamers.
And one of the things I'll say about what we saw from him in the preseason, there are things to like, right? I think we saw an adjustment to the differentiation of speed at the college level and the NFL level a little bit for him there. There were times where he would go in for the kill shot from a hit standpoint and would miss the tackle because, he thought he hit him hard enough, the guy would just fall over. It's a little bit different at the NFL. So if he can brush up in those areas, I think he'll have an opportunity. And look, he got better every single week on the practice squad, on the scout team, helping the team out. The team has seen a lot on him, but they need him to take the next step, as you had said. And right now, special teams is the one way to do it because one of their key special teams guys as well, Delarian Turner-Yell, is not expected to be ready for the start of the season after he had ACL surgery last month. Obviously, in the second to last game, it was the second to last game, was against the Chargers on punt. He was running down there to make a tackle, and he hyperextended his knee, or it got contacted one way or the other. He tore his ACL. He had to wait about a month, like 6 to 8 weeks there, in order to rehab and get ready to have surgery before he had surgery because of mobility. They always want to make sure that you get your extension and your flexion proper before you go and you have your knee cut up, because then scar tissue can make your recovery really, really hard. I ran into that issue in my recovery, and it prolonged it there. So they went through a rehab process there with him, and he should be ready at some point, maybe by, I'd say, maybe November of next year. I don't want to put a specific timeline on it, but that's the vibe that I'm getting there. And even then, like, he's going to have to work his way back. He's going to have to get the confidence back mentally to be able to go through the process of planting, cutting, and doing all those things, all the obstacles that athletes run into. And Turner, I will say this, was a guy who surprised me last year. He had some moments where he came up big when he was forced to step on the field defensively. I'll go back to the Chicago Bears game. He had a key stop on 4th down that I thought was huge for the Broncos defense in their comeback there. But there were also areas where he struggled in pass coverage and teams looked to go his way. Now, I think that's fixable. It's coachable, and he's proven to be a coachable player. So how does this impact change? I imagine he's going to start the season on the PUP list, but if he's not ready, it also means that a door opens up for some of the younger guys that the Broncos have on their futures roster, right? Guys like Devin Key, Keidron Smith. I will say Devin Key right now is a name that Broncos fans should probably keep a little bit of an eye on.
I think so too, Cody. And I think one thing that this whole discussion reminds me of is that the Broncos, since they're going so young in the defensive backfield, at safety, corner, they really need to make sure that they invest. As we sit here today recording this episode, we're kind of reacting to this NFL free agency frenzy as it's ongoing. So the Broncos could make me look like I've got egg on my face after we recorded this episode and publish it. But I think they would be doing a disservice to this young secondary if they don't invest in the defensive front. Like, the secondary is only going to be as effective as the pressure that's being created up front by these guys. And so the defensive line almost needs to be completely revamped. That edge position is a question mark. You and I have discussed that, even with all those young guys, like there's a lot of potential there and potential for growth. Are we going to see that in year, 2, 3 for some of these guys, or year 4 for some of them as well? The defensive front, I think the Broncos would be absolutely kind of screwing these defensive backs over if they don't go out and invest in the defensive line. They need to get some hogs up front for these guys to be able to benefit, for them to be able to reach their full potential. As we see, they're young players on the back end of this secondary. They're promising guys. These are guys that maybe they might be better second contract players than they were rookie contract players. And if that's going to be the case, I think the Broncos need to go invest in some big guys up front.
Well, we'll see exactly what they decide to do. NFL free agency is a long process. There's wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. We've already seen some big splashes around the entire NFL, including some former Broncos now going elsewhere. Russell Wilson signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Lloyd Cushenberry to the Tennessee Titans. And kicker news, folks, Will Lutz not coming back to Denver. He's going to the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they had Brandon McManus last year. What is going on? We'll react to all of that and much more. And the Broncos make any more moves, we'll have emergency episodes for you. But you can expect that on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.